Give us a nod when it's our broadcast is live. Okay.
Great. Well, welcome to all the MU members who are watching. I'm Deputy General Secretary of the Musicians Union, Naomi Pole, and I'm going to be chairing the event today. We've got Andy Corrigan with us from Viva La Visa, and thanks so much for hosting the event today, Andy.
Thank you to Naomi, and thank you to Dave for inviting me.
And Dave Webster's our live performance organiser at the MU, and he's very much on top of all things Brexit and helping us to try and navigate the situation as it is so far for musicians. I think this is quite a challenging time. It's interesting because obviously with the live music industry being pretty much closed down at the moment, there's not a lot of touring going on. So I think if it wasn't for that, we'd probably find musicians already grappling with the issue of work permits and visas and trying to get across the border with their instruments. So in a sense, we're talking in very much kind of theoretical terms at the moment. But we have been doing a lot of work to try to get to the bottom of what the situation is and what members need to get in place before they go on a tour. And Andy, obviously we work closely with you already in terms of visas. Perhaps you could just tell us a bit about Viva La Visa and the services that you offer for MU members.
Yeah, sure. We are Viva La Visa is our company, and we provide immigration visa services mostly to the entertainment industry and in particular to the music industry. And we will sort out your work visas for whatever country you want to go to or to come into the UK. And if you lose your passport at 3 o'clock in the morning, we'll get you a new one. That kind of thing. And in terms of, we offer an advice service for MU members, and we offer a discounted rate on us if you choose to use our, we're a commercial company, obviously. If you choose to use our services to have your visas processed, we'll give you, if you're an MU member, if you tell us your number, we'll give you a 20% off our fees for any services you use. And this particular event came about because, obviously, as you're very well aware, at the 1st of January, the UK left the EU, and we're now in this situation of being a third country in terms of as far as the EU is concerned, and losing all those rights to free movement which we had as members of the EU. And while it should be straightforward, and we would just fall into the category of US, for instance, US people going to the EU or Canadian or Japanese, that's people that don't need a visa to enter the EU. In practice, it doesn't seem to be quite so straightforward, because while large-scale tours from the US took place fine without any impediment or seem to, now we're seeing, because the needs of musicians coming from the UK are so different, because many were in the habit of just popping over and almost commuting from the EU and back, and which wasn't the case with people from over the Atlantic. And there are all sorts of little rules and regulations that are now popping up, and we are kind of in this category of, oh, we never thought about that. And what happens if this happens? And the government didn't think about that. And, we're all kind of, we're all guilty as charged in a way. And we're trying to navigate through the regulations as they are, and at the same time lobbying our governments and the EU governments to try and provide solutions. And one of the main issue is that, because even though the many decisions about immigration by the EU are made on a pan-EU basis, it's left to each individual country to organise and set their own regulations about entry and work permits. It's why you get variations from country to country. And we're also seeing that once we start drilling down and looking into the regulations of each individual state, we're finding bits of statute on their books that they've kind of have lain dormant possibly for some years, but are there, and we have to be prepared for them to be implemented. So we have to be prepared for the worst. So that's the background story. As Naomi said, had been in normal times and touring was taking place on a larger scale, maybe a lot of these problems would be now being sorted out, because practice would say this is how things are, and this is what's going to happen, because there is that sort of discrepancy between theory and practice. Anyway, enough of my yakking, as they say in the film. We've got a list of questions. I think Naomi's going to handle them, and we'll endeavour to answer them.
Fantastic. Yeah, we've had a really brilliant list of questions from members already, but anyone watching on Facebook or via YouTube can put some questions in the comments as well, and we'll try and get to as many as possible. So the first question we've got from Corrigan in Liverpool is about the visa and work permit situation that you've just alluded to, Andy. So is the work permit and visa situation clear at the moment, or is it still being negotiated?
Short answer is, go on, Dave. Yeah.
Well, yeah, short answer is, I mean, it's a very, very good question. It's a timely one. Short answer is, it's not clear at the moment entirely, and it's not so much still being negotiated, but we, the music industry, and it's not just Andy and the MU, but it's UK music, it's all of the big tour promoters, it's all of the music industry is scrabbling around trying to find exactly what is the case. As far as personal items, portable musical instruments, we're 90% sure that that's going to be okay, but we're waiting for that other 10% to fall in before we can definitely say that as a solo traveler traveling with a portable instrument, i.e. your guitar or your violin, you should be okay. But we don't fully know yet, and we are pushing to try and get an answer to that. And there's been meetings today to try to get that going. And there's a meeting on Monday with government to try and push that forward to get the answers we need to make that easier for you. If you're going in a car or a van and you've got gear, then we think at the moment, yes, you will need a carnet.
You just come on to the situation with instruments and taking equipment with you. Which, as you say, we're hopeful that portable instruments will be all right. But if you're traveling in a van or car, you might need a carnet. But in terms of work permits and visas, we're pretty clear that, there's about 17 territories in the EU where you definitely won't need a work permit or a visa. And obviously, we're going to be getting information up for our members. But a lot of member states will require either a work permit or a work visa or both. Is that right, Andy?
Not what's up to a point. The general rule is, in terms of us being a third country in relation to the EU, no visas are necessary for visits up to 90 days. However, other requirements, if you're working, that changes. Most countries in the EU, most of the major destinations like France, Germany, Netherlands, Belgium, have a dispensation that you're allowed to go in for performances of up to 90 days. The amount of time varies slightly from country to country without needing any further documentation, no work permit, no visa. Some countries have requirements for a work permit, like Italy does, but we haven't seen these being enforced, and they're not an entry requirement to the country. One country, and two countries rather in particular, Spain and Portugal, have now brought up a law which says that you require, if you're performing there, that you require a visa in lieu of work permit. So it's an entry visa, not a work permit. Our advice is that if you're touring in one of these countries, check with your promoter, check who's employing you, what their requirements are, because obviously it's partly their responsibility to arrange work permits, or generally that's who will be arranging them. And if you're in doubt, check with an expert and get that advice and assurance about what's happening, because these things are being made to negotiate bilaterally on a country to country basis. But as Naomi and Dave said, these things are still ongoing. The case is mostly settled, but not completely for some countries. And to hark back to the carnet issue, that the situation is the EU regulation law is there, so it's okay for the EU side, and there's a parallel or a mirror legislation in the UK. We're just waiting for corroboration that still applies, that hasn't been repealed. But we're hopeful, as Dave said, we're hopeful that we will get that assurance. Yeah, that's for portable musical instruments, personal musical instruments, to not need any kind of customs clearance, to be for temporary import and export. Okay.
That's right. And we're in the process of negotiating some discounts on carnets for MU members as well. So hopefully there'll be some more news on that on our website shortly. We've had some questions around tax, national insurance, social security, and as I understand it, there's a social security agreement in place with the EU, which member states have signed up to. So do we understand that our members will only have to pay tax in the place where they live, not the place where they work?
It's social security, not tax. The tax treaties haven't changed at all because of Brexit. The tax treaties remain as they are. The social security side of things, there's a thing called a detached worker status, which all of the EU 27 member states were asked to opt into, and they had up until the 1st of February to opt in. And the information we've had, I've yet to see this corroborated in writing, but we've been told that all 27 member states have signed up to the detached worker status, the rules for that, which means essentially that you should be paying social security in the UK as opposed to the country in which you are working or being paid. So that should settle that score. But as I've said, with so much of what we're talking about today, we are on shifting sands. So until we get something firm in writing from the authorities, and when we get it, we'll post it up and we can make it all very clear. But as I understand it, we've got some better news on the social security side of things.
And at the point of the dreaded A1 form, which people wait for many months, and whether it's being applied for, is no longer. We're not sure whether old forms are still honoured. It's been replaced by the 3236, I think it's called. If you go on the government website and search for that, you will find instructions how to complete that new application. We don't know whether that's going to be any quicker than the old one, but we're hopeful. So it's been replaced, new form.
And absolutely, Andy, thank you. Sorry to interrupt, but if you're an MU member, of course, do contact your regional office. We can put you in touch with our tax advisors, because they can give you a specific advice on tax, which you'll need. We can't give specific advice on tax.
All right.
I've got a couple more Carnet related questions. One is that somebody says, I understand that we might need to leave a deposit of cash or a bond as a guarantee for any equipment that's taken into the EU. So maybe we could just explain how that works. And also someone's asked if you can use a duplicate list instead of a Carnet.
The Carnet process, it does. You do need to have an insurance bond, but if you go to the LCCI to get your Carnet or one of the Carnet companies, they all have a scheme by which you buy into their insurance scheme, and the fee is in relation. So it's not you don't have to pay a huge amount for the fee. It's probably a couple of £100 for the average band's backline and instruments, and that's probably slightly on the generous side.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the Carnet itself lasts for a year, but you only need to take out the security bond for the specific time that you're touring for. So it doesn't have to be for the full year. It can be just for a couple of months or something like that. And the London Chamber of Commerce, there's a bit on their website, a calculator, so you can put in kind of how much your gear's worth, how long you want to go for, where you're going, which is the EU, and it'll give you a price on what it is. I mean, as Naomi said, we've been working with the London Chamber and Boomerang Carnets to get some discounted rates for our members, which we should be able to advertise fairly soon.
But if you're doing it without, normally if you say it's the Carnet fee, if you're not a member of the LCCIs, I think it's £300, £360, and the Carnet bond for 30 grand's worth of backline is probably for 2 months is £200. So that's the order of cost. So if you factor that in, but it's a pretty straightforward process, and you're not required to stump up for your own bond. You can, of course, provide your own bond outside of those systems, but most people don't, because it's so easy to do, and it will probably cost you more money anyway.
Yeah, well, yeah, we're trying to get these down as much as possible, because none of us wanted this. It's now a fact that this is the situation we're in. So we're working with the companies to try and get as low a cost as possible, and those companies are being very helpful. So we'll hopefully get some good news out soon. On the duplicate list question, that's an interesting one, but we believe that duplicate lists are not a safe alternative to the Carnet. Duplicate lists, I understand, can only really be used in countries that don't recognise the ATA Carnet system, and it's also for use only at the UK border. So it doesn't guarantee you anything outside of the UK if the countries you're going to recognise the ATA Carnet system. So I would advise the use of a duplicate list.
Although the slightly misleading information on the government website does say you can use a duplicate list if you don't want to use a carnet. But in practice, to be safe, and also bearing in mind that we may get situations where people at EU borders are not being as friendly and helpful as they might be, well, not to say that they won't be, a carnet is a better bet. A carnet is a safer, if you've got a ton of gear, take a carnet. It's a safer bet because we have heard of problems with duplicate lists, but it's there, but we don't advise using it.
We've been asked a live question, so someone who's watching at the moment, does a full-size keyboard in a flight case count as a personal or portable instrument? My reaction is if you can carry it and you're on public transport, then it probably is. But I think we're saying at the moment that, we still need 100% clarity on whether this would mean you're exempt from getting a carnet. And at the moment, it's probably best to get a carnet in place just in case.
Something big and bulky like that, it might be that it ends up having to go freight or in the hold anyway, so that might be a further thing to consider when you're talking about a big instrument in a flight case.
It's an always, this advice, it's not having a carnet is always a risk. If you're carrying a guitar or a violin or something, or accordion, you're pretty, in the past, you know that you're pretty well safe, or obviously we're still waiting for that corroboration. If it's something that in a flight case that looks like professional equipment, you can get stopped and questioned and said, hey, that's not your personal thing.
That's why
Henry stamped on it or something like that, then maybe,
No, you're right, Andy, but that's why we need this clarification.
Yeah.
If anyone does encounter a problem, we can push back on that. So that's why we need the HMRC to be very, very clear with us. Yes.
We've had a question about merchandise. So obviously carnets are for equipment that you're taking with you that you plan to bring back. So it's your own equipment it's the equipment you use for work, but not something you're planning to sell. So with merchandise, we've had a question, will that be taxed as well? And is there any paperwork you need in place if you're taking merchandise in the back of a vehicle or whatever?
You need an EORI number. You can apply for that. Again, if you have a look at the flow chart the MU's put together, there's a link to application for an EORI number. Again, there's another question mark about whether you take a bit of merchandise in your personal baggage, i.e. you take a few CDs to sell or T-shirts to sell in your personal baggage. But at the end of the day, if you're trading, then the chances are you're going to need to pay the duty on that. But getting an EORI number allows you to have the right paperwork in place when you go. So it's carnets for gear and it's EORI numbers for merchandise.
And there is a thought that for amounts of if you're exporting goods less value than £1,500, you don't need to make an export declaration for them. So the best thing I would suggest is you check on, if you've got a specific question, we can point you in the direction. There is a place on the government website which is called Taking Commercial Goods Out of Great Britain in Your Baggage, which that applies for taking commercial goods out of Great Britain in your baggage, which isn't the same as taking them out in the back of your van. So the allowance there is a fairly narrow one.
I think that still needs clarification, Andy. Again, like with so much at the moment, it's not as entirely clear as the government website would make out. That's the only thing I'd say there is if you're going out with stuff that's less than 1,500 and you're selling it, I would check back in when you're doing it, and we will hopefully get you the very cast iron information, because the conversations I've had say it's not entirely clear, depending on who you speak to.
Right. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
I've had a question about whether the process of applying for a work permit or a visa is any different for a private engagement. So say you're going over to perform at a wedding as opposed to going to perform at a festival.
That's a good question. I'm not sure, Andy.
Are you being paid? If it's the rules for most EU countries are not as well defined. The general rule is if you're being paid, or even if you're not being paid, if this is what you do for a living, then you would require a permit. It doesn't. That's saying that rule doesn't apply. That rule applies to many countries, including the US. You don't have to be paid. It doesn't apply to the UK. So if you're performing in the UK for free, you're not required to have a permit. But I don't think there's no distinction between private and public. No, for that purpose. If you're being paid, then you'll need a work permit. That's what you're doing. It's employment.
Yeah. And what about if you're going to perform for free at a showcase or something like that?
That's promotion. That's the general definition of that. That's promotional, and not if it's again the lead on this is US law or interpretation of it. Generally, showcase performances, if you're not being paid and the audience isn't paying, that's promotion, and it's not. You don't require a work permit.
Great, thank you. Somebody's asked about time frames. So if you're preparing to go and do a gig in the EU, how long is it going to take to get all the various bits of paperwork in place? I know on the Carnet side, when we've talked to Carnet providers, you can actually apply online in most cases, and it's relatively quick turnaround, probably a matter of 48 hours or so. Is that right, Dave? But
they can turn the Carnets around pretty quickly. I think if it's slower because of COVID. I think the LCC does do a 24-hour turnaround. They advertise that they do. Whether that's actually what happens because of COVID is another question. And Boomerang can do a fairly quick turnaround as well. So yeah, probably 48 hours. I give yourself as much lead time as you can on these things. In terms of applying and getting the work permits and stuff, Andy, how's that? I know nightmare for the USA, can take a very long time for USA, but what about Europe, do you think?
The Spanish are saying 30 days to do their visa application this at present.
Right.
Work permits, anything from a couple of weeks they take. It's into the work for the countries that require a work permit. That's not to admit you to that's not to enter the country. You can enter the country without the work permit. You're supposed to have the work permit to work in the country. So in theory, you can. In Italy, you need a work permit. You can enter Italy without it, and then that work permit can be issued while you're there. However, at the moment, the other problem is that COVID rules are being kind of are getting all mixed up with Brexit rules, and so there are COVID restrictions on entering lots of countries at the moment. And we have people, because we also deal with quite a lot of people in the fashion industry. Many of whom are traveling quite extensively at the moment around Europe, and we're seeing that the implementation of rules is varied. And so we're advising them to try and get work authorizations before they travel, rather than after they arrive there. But that's the ruling on that you don't need it to enter the country. In France, when we used to have work permits that were up until 2016 for all people from outside of the EU, they used to take a minimum of 2 weeks and generally 6 weeks, depending on how the authorities were feeling about it. So the answer is we don't know. That it's best to with your promoter and somebody, and an expert about the timing, what you need, and the timings to take and to get to do the process.
Thank you. We've had a question from a member of ours who lives in Ireland, and another question live about needing carnets to fly around within the UK. So at the moment with carnets, we've been told you don't currently need one, or at least you can't get one at the moment to go to Northern Ireland.
We've been told.
But if you go into the Republic of Ireland, you would need one. And we need clarification as well on the visas and work permits side.
If for Ireland, you don't need anything. It's the common travel area. You don't need anything to go and perform in Ireland in terms of visa or work permit. Nothing.
Sorry, can you just clarify that? You say you don't need a visa or work permit to work in Southern Ireland, even though they are part of the EU?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And in terms of the rest of the British Isles, you don't need carnets if you're flying to I don't know, Isle of Man or
No. You don't need anything. The only question was, did you need something was the question about Northern Ireland, and I'm not sure whether that got decided. I think that was a question, wasn't it, whether you needed one if you were going to Northern Ireland?
Well, this is the thing. When we talked to, I think the London Chamber of Commerce, they said you can't currently get a carnet to go to Northern Ireland. That doesn't mean that it won't be introduced.
Yeah.
So I think even they are still waiting to hear on that one.
Yeah. Okay.
Another question here. My band live in the UK, consists of 2 EU band members and 2 UK band members. So do we still need an EORI number for any merch to be sold in the EU? And do the EU band members need a carnet when they're playing the EU as well?
I wouldn't have thought so, because they are EU citizens and therefore they've got their own gear. So, that's fine. And if the merchandise is generated in the EU and sold in the EU, then they would fall under those EU rules. If the merchandise was generated in the UK, taken out to the EU, then EORI number would be needed. That's my understanding of how to answer that question. Very interesting.
It's in terms of goods. It's the movement of where the goods are moving from, unless it's personal. If it's equipment and it's in the UK, it's coming from the UK, then it should have a carnet to be temporarily exported. Or if it's goods, if it's equipment in the EU and it's coming to the UK, it would need it that way. You can't have it both ways. And if it's EU people's personal instruments, then it works the other way. You see what I mean? And they were bringing them into the UK, then they would be exempt because under EU, hopefully exempt from under the rules, or not if the rules are decided the other way. So are these people? They're all based in the UK, are they?
It sounds like it's a band who are a couple of EU-based band members and a couple of UK-based band members. They've obviously been able to work together no problem up until now, but it's going to get a little bit trickier.
Well, it shouldn't. I mean, if they're traveling, it only becomes a problem if the EU people are working in the UK, in which case they would need, if they're working in the UK, they'd need either a cost or becoming a permitted paid engagement. To work in the UK in theory, and for the UK people, for them to work they need whatever authorization was needed for wherever they were working in the EU.
Can I just jump back on something? I've had a text message from a colleague in the Association of British Orchestras. He's just had confirmation that carnets will be needed for Great Britain to Northern Ireland for shipments.
Right. Okay.
Not for portable.
Right.
We can check that out. Just a text message came through.
Yeah. So what does shipments qualify? Is that a van full of gear, or is that Rocket Cargo sending a container of stuff over for you?
I think. Well, I would.
That's the question on that one. I would ask.
Yeah, I currently interpret shipments to be what's in a vehicle,
right,
as opposed to portable carry-on. Yeah. But we can get that checked.
Well, that's something that whole Northern Ireland carnet issue or not has been something that's been kicking around for a while. It's been one that's been kind of tossed back and forward because it's it breaks the rules in a way of needing a carnet as to another part of the United Kingdom. Anyway, don't want to go there.
What a headache.
Watch this space. If you get a carnet, get one that covers you for as many countries as you're likely to go to. So whether you get one, as Naomi said, you can't get one for Northern Ireland at the moment. But if you get one, you can get one for the EU, which is Southern Ireland.
I did get a question about how flexible carnets are. So if you've got a list of equipment on there and it's a carnet that lasts a year, but you need to change the list of equipment halfway through the year, can you do that easily?
Go with less equipment, but you can't go with more. You can't add to it. You can say we're not taking these things, but you can't add things to it, because that changes the bond and changes the carnet.
Yes, it's the list of instruments, isn't it?
Yes. So the general list, I think you can take away from the general list, but not add to it. So no, it's easy for me to say, but what larger tours do is just get a new carnet. So very often on a larger tour, you'll find there are half a dozen carnets going around and traveling with the equipment. But obviously, if it's a small outfit, then they might just have to. If they're changing over the equipment, they might either put everything on the carnet that you're ever going to need to take. But that doesn't help you if you're buying new stuff. If you buy new stuff along the way, it's just, I'm afraid it's going to be another cost. But obviously, with your superbly negotiated rates, it won't be as hopefully as burdensome as it might be.
Certainly hope so.
Yeah.
I've had another question about merchandise and the rate of duty that's payable. I don't know if that varies territory to territory or if that's EU-wide, but let me just plug the AIM website as well, the Association of Independent Music, because they're independent record labels. So obviously what they do is kind of sales. So I think they've got a lot of useful information on their website. But I don't know if anybody, Andy or Dave, if you know anything more about the duty that might be payable.
Sorry, that's beyond my. I wouldn't. It's beyond my ken, that one. But do check with Abe. It's something that we will be as Viva La Visa, because it's not. Although it's not our speciality, it's something we get asked. Obviously, we get asked about quite a lot, and it's good to have a little bit of knowledge, but not a dangerous amount of knowledge, and to know where to point, what direction to point people. But we do know we work together with AIM on their immigration stuff, and really good, and they're very super helpful. Join them as well. Yeah. If you can.
Somebody's asked if a carnet can cover 10 people, or do you need to get an individual carnet per person?
Well,
it's not about a person, it's about equipment. And in terms of the signer, the designated person, it can be, the whatever it is, the name of your band, plus any authorized representative. And so it can be anyone. Someone has to go and be the signatory and the person that gets it through the border, but that can be any representative, and you can word the application like that. It's nothing to do with people.
The info I got was along those lines. If you're traveling together in a car or a van and you've got your gear, then you need one carnet to cover all the gear, so long as it is owned by the people in the van. I think this question is talking about 10 people all flying individually. Individually, and let's assume for a moment that the portable instrument exemption doesn't apply. Then yes, you would each individually need your own carnet. If you travel collectively with your gear, then one carnet will cover all of you, and so as a band you can split that cost. It's going to make it cheaper. That was a conversation that we had with the London Chamber about that.
Yes, agreed. Oh, I was thinking. Sorry, I got the wrong end of the stick. Yeah, because what a carnet relates to is if a customs person is inspecting it, they are looking at what you've got with you, and they can say, "Can I see item 379, please?" on the carnet, and you'll say, "Here it is," and show it to them. And if they say, "Oh, that's with my friend who's not on this plane," then no, it doesn't work. So it's a carnet per travelling party. So yeah, or more than one. If there's
think of it as the instrument's passport is often how it's referred to, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I've had a couple of questions about EU musicians working in the UK. Can an EU freelancer still freelance for a British company? So obviously I know you've already referred to the paid permitted engagements route, Andy, into the UK. As I understand it, EU musicians are treated as non-visa nationals coming into the UK. So there's the paid permitted engagements route, there's the permit-free festivals, and tier 5, which is for temporary workers. Is it fairly easy to get into the UK, and is it fairly low cost or cost free?
It's not, well, permitted. It's harder to get into the UK to perform than it is to get into the EU to perform. So that might be a cause of a bit of unhappiness in certain EU countries, because it's not equal. It's not equal at all. It's harder to get into the UK. The 3 routes: permitted paid engagement is free, except that you have to produce a lot of paperwork, and it's decided at the border whether they let you in or not. They generally do, and you have to be. The thing about it is that you are supposed to be a professional person, and this is what you're supposed to do for a living, and you're supposed to provide proof that this of you doing it for a living in your home country, and you have to have contracts for what you're doing in the UK, and you need to show a letter of invitation from the person that's employing you, and where you're, and evidence of where you're going to be staying. So quite a lot of stuff to deal with, and to be presented at the border. The tier 5 COS is a work permit issued by either your employer or an agency working on behalf of your employer can issue it for you, and that's straightforward. And
that's the easiest route, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it's far the easiest route, and it's far the most acceptable route. The cost, if you're a licensed sponsor, is £21 to issue it. If you have to get a third party to issue it, then they will charge a fee for that. But it's very straightforward, and it's not a problem at the border. It's generally accepted at the border. People say, yeah, this is fine. That can last up to 3 months without a visa. If you've got a contract, and you have to have virtually continuous employment during the COS period, the period it's issued for, to cover that, with no gaps of more than 40, I think it's either 14 or 18 days. So it has to be fairly continuous employment. And if you want to be in for longer than 3 months, a tier 5 COS could be issued for up to a year, but you need to have a visa if it's over 3 months. So, and the permit-free festival is great. If all you're coming in to do is a permit-free festival, you can't do it. You can't come in for a month and do a permit-free festival. And there aren't that many permit-free festivals. I mean, there are a few, because it's quite hard to get onto the permit-free festival list. It's the larger ones that have been established for quite some time that are on it. So those are the normal routes. There are other routes that you can come in if you have a permanent, if you have a permanent job offer. You can come in as a skilled worker, a musician skilled worker, but that'd be for someone if you are offered a salaried position of being paid more than 26 grand a year, and that's a route you can do. The other route that people can consider is the global talent one, which is if you want to come to the UK for a long period of time, and you are quite established or have potential, you can do the global talent route, which means you can stay in the UK for either up to 5 years, and it doesn't require an employment contract. You don't have to have a job for that, and it's potentially a very good route if people are thinking of spending, from the EU or anywhere else, are thinking of spending some time here. But it's quite complicated to apply for, but it's doable.
We've had a question, which is an interesting one. Are there any implications for work visa requirements with other countries, for example, the US, now that we've left the EU? Presumably our current arrangements are predicated on US-EU agreements.
The US has there's no change from the US. The US has requirements for work permits and visas, which are the same for all, well, in theory, the same for all nationalities, all countries, the same requirement. They don't have different, they have an odd one. There are particular ones for Australia, treaty ones for Australia, and there may well be in the future the same thing for Ireland. But no, it's the same.
Great, and we know that there are some problems going to the US. We've certainly had musicians face problems there, but we don't want to see that replicated across the EU, do we?
No, in some ways, the US in some ways it's straightforward, because their rules are much clearer, than possibly some of the EU ones, and
it's just really expensive to get a work visa.
Yes, but then again, on the other hand, you can get 3 years and be able to work for 3 years. But yeah, I agree, the initial costs can be quite high. But if you want to come to the UK for 3 years, it's also pretty expensive. the cost is cost is similar by the time you've paid 620 quid a year health surcharge, and a skill shortage list. If you're getting a skilled worker route, the costs the costs can mount up. Anyway, actually, but yes, the US is expensive. Yeah, agreed. But yes, it's going to be. It makes having left the EU makes no difference.
Okay, thanks. You just mentioned health there briefly, and I know that we checked out whether the EHIC card that our members might have at the moment. I understand you can still use that up until its expiry date, and then you need to apply for something new. Is that right, Dave?
There was a big question mark about that, Naomi, just before we got to the 1st of January, that the EHIC card would no longer be valid. But it turned out that it is valid up until the time it expires. So I had a look on mine. Mine expires in 2023, so mine's still valid. But the thing that replaces it is called a GHIC card, a global health insurance card, and you apply for that in the same way that you apply for an EHIC card. So if you are planning anything this year and you've got an EHIC card, check the date in the bottom right-hand corner, and if it expires this year, probably time to get a new one.
Yeah, we've got a flow chart on the homepage of the MU website, which takes individual musicians through what they might need, and it's got lots of useful links for things like applying for the GHIC card. So members should definitely check that out.
Just on that, Naomi, actually, on that flow chart, it's a live document, and as things change and as we get more clarity, we will be adding to that. So we will be adding to the links that you can see in the little arrow on the bottom right-hand corner as things develop. Hopefully very soon we're going to be able to link through to the new CITES requirements for instruments with endangered species that we've been working on. So that's all going to get updated fairly soon. So do keep an eye on it. Don't just download it and print it off or whatever, because it's a live document. So keep coming back to the website and checking because there may be further links and further information available in there. Certainly as far as the carnet issue is concerned, we should be able to link through to the 2 discounted schemes that we've been working on fairly soon.
So with the you mentioned CITES. So if you've got an instrument that's got rosewood in it or ivory or something like that, you need to get a special musical instrument certificate.
Depending on which appendix or which annex of the CITES regulations it falls into, yes. And all that is made very clear now, will be made very clear now as soon as we get the information up on our website. And for those who are not sure, we're hoping to host a webinar with the Animal Plant Health Authority in Bristol around about early March. So if you've got an instrument that's got endangered species in it, or you think you have, you want to find out some more information about that, check into that webinar, which will be, as I say, in March, and you can ask questions. We'll also have somebody from Border Force on that who will be able to advise as well. But yeah, that's all going to be in place very soon.
Great, thanks. It's probably another one for Andy. Do we need to consider the amount of time each British person spends in the EU in a certain period? And does it matter if those days are work days or holidays?
Yes and no. It's the answer to that. Yeah, we do. It's the time is 90 days in 180. If you're on anything other than a long stay visa, and 180 days. The clock starts again. After 180 days, you get another 90. No, it's the time spent in the EU Schengen area that counts.
I understand from looking at some of the things that have come in, though, that some of the countries vary on their time limits. I think
they vary on time limits for work, for permit-free work or work permits, but the visit rule is still 90 in 180, and those short-term working arrangements fall within. No one's got. You can come in without a work permit or anything for more than 90 days. If it's more than 90 days, you need a long stay visa. And we're certainly doing quite a few applications at the moment for people for long stay visas mostly in France, of people who work a lot in France. If you work, if you say you work a lot in France or intending to over the next year, it's possible to apply for a long stay visa for France, and that will give you the time you spend in the country of your long stay visa will not count against your 90, 180 day period, and you can use that up in the rest of the EU. And if you have a work permit long stay visa for one country, that will permit you to be in the rest of the EU, but it won't permit you to work in the rest of the EU. You'll still need whatever local work permissions are required.
Another question about carnets. How detailed do we have to be on the carnet? I use live electronics with my band. So there's multiple bits of electronics like foot pedals, controllers, rack mounted equipment and cables. Do I have to list every single bit?
That's an interesting one. I mean, I've got a bit of information on that, Andy. I don't know what you feel about this, but we did raise that question with the London Chamber because, you know, there's that question mark of strings that break and sticks that break, and do you have to bring a broken pair of sticks back with you and push them together and say to the border guard, there you go, look, that's a stick, it's on the list. Everything that you've got, if you list everything that you've got, you have to bring everything back. But I think there's a way that you can say a box of accessories and cables, and if you bring a box of accessories and cables, then you're bringing back what you brought out. But if you say I'm bringing back or I'm taking out a box of sticks, for example, and you come back without a box of sticks because they've all broken and you've thrown them away, that could be problematic. So make sure you've got enough. But I think that's my understanding of that question when we pose that to the carnet people. What's your take on it, Andy?
Well, from the practical point of view, I was a tour manager for a long time, and when we used to have to do carnets for every border in Europe and done them for the rest of the world, and we would be sort of pragmatic about carnet lists, and there would be, words like one set of, would be a toolkit, would be. I think you're digging your own grave if you get sort of too silly. Well, you have to be truthful. So if anything major listed, if it's a bunch of leads, it's one set of leads is what I would do. Just be sensible about it, because you can get a difficult customs person who will say, I want to see this. This particular small thing, I think it's good to clearly, to say when you're doing your carnet list, to be as clear as possible. So if a person is a customs person, does say they want to have a look, then it's easy for them to find that thing. It says case number, if it's case number 3 containing, one set of tools, one set of, one guitar, and that can easily find it rather than try and make it easy for them. But yes, it's okay to group things together.
But looking at that question in detail, I mean, foot pedals, controllers, rack-mounted equipment. I think that's the sort of thing that would need individually listing. When you get into lots of cables, I think Andy's kind of covered that.
Oh, if it's a rack full of effects or something, that you'd need to list them, because they could be individually, they could be quite expensive items. They could be, a couple of grand each, couldn't they? So they should be listed. Be sensible about it. I think, and is the way to be. And yes, if it's individual serial numbered items, then you should list them. If it's got a serial number on it, you should list it. But if it's a bunch of guitar picks or whatever, just put guitar picks.
I think another thing worth thinking about here actually is if you've got any documentation that just states you're the owner of that instrument. If you've got stuff sitting in your filing cabinet of instruments that you bought, good idea to take a file of copies with you, just so you can prove ownership, and that makes the instrument a personal item to you as well.
Yeah, that's always a good idea. I forgot to mention that when the whole thing about carnets for personal instruments. Yeah, well, you always used to advise people to carry, a receipt for, guitars and stuff like that. Particularly in the days of, it's not long gone now, when you bring back guitars from America and take them out again, and they would cost a couple of $100 in America, but they'd be worth a lot more over here, and would be, you'd buy them in secondhand shops, and they'd be vintage instruments and actually be worth a lot of money. But sometimes they took convincing that it wasn't, you hadn't paid loads of money for it, and it wasn't, and you weren't trying to pull the wool over their eyes. So yes, in short, if you've got a receipt, take it, and to show you're the owner. Yeah.
I just wanted to touch on cabotage, which is something that's come up quite a lot in the discussions we've had with UK Music, which is the sort of umbrella body for the commercial music industry. Essentially, with the cabotage rules, I understand that if you're taking a lorry of equipment, you can only make 2 stops in the EU and then you have to return to the UK. So obviously that's going to affect orchestras touring and, you know, featured artists who are touring with a crew and a bunch of equipment. Probably not so much the individual musician, but is there anything that our members should know about that?
I know that the ABO have been looking into this from the point of view of larger vehicles and the cabotage thing, and I know that Mark there has been in negotiations, because I didn't, you know, a lot of orchestras own their own lorries, and they own them, and they're trying to get a kind of ruling that this didn't apply to owned vehicles. Cabotage didn't apply to owned vehicles, and that's my understanding of that. And also my understanding, again, I'm not a trucking expert. My understanding is that it only applies to larger vehicles. It's over 3.5 ton.
It does at the moment, Andy. You're right. There's a couple of things that I've learned just today around the cabotage ruling. It's again another one of these things that's fluid. There's a lobby going on to try to get the old position back again, to allow the big tours to take place, the multi-city tours to take place. But one thing I've been told is that as far as the weight is concerned, so if you're in a splitter van, then up to 3.5 tons, you fall underneath the cabotage rules, and that's fine. But unfortunately, February next year, that drops to 2.5 tons, so that's going to become problematic. The other thing I learned this morning, say if you're in a sleeper bus and you've got a trailer, and the trailer's got all your gear in, and this is why I was talking about having some kind of documentation that links you to the gear as a personal item. This again needs verification, so I say that guardedly. But if the goods are linked to you as personal goods and you're under 3.5 tons, then the cabotage rules should not apply to you. But if you hire gear, so if you hire the PA, you hire the lights, and you've got stuff that isn't directly linked to you as a personal item, then the cabotage rules will apply, because you'll become a commercial vehicle. So that all needs ironing out and verifying. I think the cabotage legislation is probably one of the more bigger problematic issues that needs to be dealt with. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And also the other thing on splitter vans, we've heard that, we know that most splitter vans, if they've got a band and a backline in, are overweight, and that we may be seeing people in police and local authorities and authorities in Europe looking out for UK registered splitter vans and pulling them over and weighing them.
Yes, if you go
like that, yeah. And it's just the nature of the nature of those vehicles are not the gross weight is not is not that high, and particularly most of them are built on Mercedes chassis, which are pretty heavy to start with.
Yeah, so it's 3.5 tons laden weight, isn't it?
Yeah, gross weight. That's your lot. Yeah, and it doesn't take, if you've got 5-6 people and a backline, then you're going to be over in the splitter van. So right. It's something for bands to be aware, to watch out for, and be aware that.
I mean, what's the way around it, and to hire the PA and the lights and stuff out in the EU, so you're only going with your instruments?
Yeah, well, most people do that anyway. Bands, very few people travel with sound systems. Mostly a band will travel with backline, will travel with drums, backline, guitars, and that's still going to take you over. If you're all in cases, it's still going to take you over, and a splitter, and maybe a few lights, but that's all. I mean, I don't know. I suppose the possibility is trailer. To pull a trailer, the gross vehicle. Again, I'm not an expert here. That's something to look into. The gross vehicle weight might be longer, but you're going to need an old, to pull a big trailer over 750 kilograms. You need to have passed your test before 97, to drive it on an ordinary license. I think the best thing to do, what I would advise a band to do, is if you've got a splitter and you've got your gear, take it to a weighbridge in the UK just to see how much over you are, rather than just talking about it abstractly. Then you'll see what what you might be able to save. But just to be aware that when you go to the EU now, that they may well be, because it didn't happen in the past very much, but there may be that kind of victimizing UK vehicles might happen.
Yeah. And if we get members who are, unfairly looked at when they're touring or whatever, do tell us about it, and we'll investigate.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, we did talk to the other musicians' unions actually around Europe, and they've kind of given us an assurance that if our members have problems, they will try and help, and vice versa. Of course, if we hear that EU musicians are struggling to get into the UK, we'll take that up. So just to reassure members, we're still lobbying the government really hard on this issue, trying to get some sort of work permit or visa waiver in place across the EU, or at least get some level of consistency when it comes to work permits. And we're working with other organisations like UK Music and the ABO, who we've mentioned, and also working with the IFM. So we're all kind of pulling together to try and get an improved deal. And the advice on our website for musicians will be constantly updated. So as soon as we get new information, it will be straight up there. Just for anyone who didn't join right at the beginning, Andy, did you want to just talk again about how our members can contact you for advice on visas?
Yeah, they can. If people have if people have got specific questions, we can we can contact us. Viva La Visa. You can email. You can email hello@vivalavisa.co.uk and send your questions in then, and we will do our best to help you out. And if we offer a discounted service to all MU members, that would give you 20%. And we're like Sofa Workshop or whatever it is. We'll offer you 20% off our services if you choose to go with us. But we're happy to talk to anyone about who's got problems or has questions about this, because we do appreciate it's complicated and it's a real problem because we're not able to road test any of these kind of things, and it's the information is so skimpy. And we know in the past that there has been a big gap between theory and practice. That lots of rules are out there, but the implementation of them, because it's not in it's not in EU government's interest to impede trade, really. Although we're stuck with the having left the EU. So I think we have to give a bit of credit. While there might be some bad feeling going on at the moment, hopefully this will go away, and everyone will realise we have to work together, and things will run more smoothly. And as soon as we get more people moving, we'll realise where the real problems are, and we'll realise where the real ones are, and where the ones that are actually slightly imaginary are.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
We're all struggling to get clarity of information right now, and it's not just the MU; it's everybody I'm talking to. And as we can bear out, we're having meetings regularly with loads of other people, and they're all saying we need this information to be very clear and very clearly set out so that we can all proceed with some kind of assurity. And none of us ever wanted to be here, but here we are. So we have to deal with what we've got.
Yeah, that's right. Well, any members who haven't had their question answered can always get in touch with us via their regional office. So please do that, and please keep an eye on the MU website. Thanks so much, Andy, for joining us. It's been really helpful.
Thanks, Andy.
I think we've recorded it. We'll make it available to members after the event as well.
Okay, very good.
Thank
you. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
All the best. Good luck. Stay safe.
Thank you.